Hey, hello everybody, welcome back to Momo versus MTG. Today we'll be taking a look at an Azorius deck that's pretty recently created by me, one of my personal commander decks, Noyan Dar Roil Shaper. It is an Azorius commander. For 3 generic and Azorius, you get a legendary creature, Merfolk Ally. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may put 3 +1/+1 counters on target land you control. If you do, that land becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste that's still a land. So, this guy dives into the funny mechanic of animating lands in Azorius colors. So, I found this guy to be pretty unique because there is a specific goal I'm trying to pull off with the deck. However, there are many other ways to pilot the deck if you can't get there. So let's take a look at what we're actually trying to do here. I would say the most important lands in the deck that we're trying to reanimate for a particular reason is Glimmer Post. It's one of the Locus land cycles, and there are only 2 of them that were ever printed. But this one reads, for Glimmer Post, it's a land locus, that's its subtype. When Glimmer Post enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life for each locus on the battlefield. Add 1 mana, 1 generic mana to your pool. So very cool. So the idea is, right, the more locus lands you have, the more value you're going to get out of that. And paired with Cloud Post is the other one. It's a land locus. Comes into play tapped, but you add 1 mana to your mana pool for each locus in play. So, as soon as you have the pair on the table, Cloud Post and Glimmer Post, this base land turns into an Ancient Tomb with no downside, or a Soul Ring, basically, right? But as you get more, either Cloud Post, you're getting more potential mana, or you're getting more potential life gain. And the paired together, depending on what you need, you can make copies of these lands, and we'll dive into how we're going to be doing that. So without further ado, let's jump right into this deck tech. Let's start with the ramp package. Love starting with the ramp package. So we're in Azorius colors, so we have some generic artifact ramp with your signets, Soul Ring Crit, of course, talismans, Wayfarer Bauble, all the nice generic ramp. A staple for me in most of my blue decks, especially in Azorius, is Midnight Clock. It's an expensive mana rock. However, when the 12-hour counter is put on it, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library and draw 7 cards. So a nice way to put cards back into your deck. If you need them again, also wheel yourself, basically, get a fresh grip if you run out of resources. So, love this card. And then, of course, I'm running the infamous pair of Land Tax and Archaeomancer map. Since we are in white, love this combo. Catch-up mechanic in white on your lands. And then we're also running something like a Mana Escape Refractor. And keep your eye out for cards like this, because enters the battlefield tapped, has all activate abilities of all lands on the battlefield. So Mana Escape Refractor becomes a pseudo copy of Cloud Post, right? Because if we have multiple Locust lands on the field, it can now tap for a ton of mana, which we are trying to do. So look out for ways like that. And this is heavy instants and sorcery, so it's kind of like ramp. Primal Amulet for 4. Looking for stuff that cheapens our instants and sorceries, of course. And has a nice effect when it also flips into the Primal Wellspring. Add a mana. It's a mana rock still, and when you cast an instant sorcery spell, copy that spell, you can choose new targets. So very cool. Extra value here. And lastly, we have Liquid Metal Torque. There's a niche case for this, but there's niche cases in a lot of commander games where you can turn something into an artifact, screw your opponent over. Or for our case, it's something of importance of us when it comes to, and I'll point that out right now, to, let's take a look here, Vinsuvan Duplimancy. So after we ramp up, what are we trying to do? And these 2 cards here are the main game plan. Ovar, the all form, and Vinsuvan Duplimancy are basically the secret commanders of the deck. because with our commander out in one of these, it reads, whenever you cast a spell that only targets a single artifact or creature you control, create a token that's a copy of that artifact or creature, except it's not legendary. So very cool card. So the niche scenario with Liquid Metal Torque is we can turn one of our lands into an artifact in addition to its type, so it's a land artifact. And that's good enough for Vesuvian Duplimancy if we don't have our commander out. So that's a niche way. If we don't have Liquid Metal Torque, then we do need our commander out with this funny enchantment here. Because it only works when you target an artifact or creature, right? To get that token copy. But Ovar is a little bit different, where he is a changeling type, but whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that only targets one, if it targets one or more other permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. When a spell or ability controls causes you to discard this card, create a token copy of a target permanent. So a lot of value in the hand in case you're in a discard, gets a discard deck. However, a ton of value in this second ability here, because now we don't have to have them become creatures when we use our instants or sorceries. However, it is nicer if they are, and we'll go into why. Because with our commander, we can target the same land again and again and grow it to be a giant creature. Because the idea is to target primarily our Cloud Post. But if we need the life gain at time, we're going to target Glimmer Post, right? But general idea is you animate this into a creature, have one of the copy effects when we target it. So now we're getting multiple Cloud Posts, which is, exponentially scaling in how much mana we have. Because even with, 3 or 4, we have, let's say 4 Locus lands out, and they're all Cloud Posts. They each tap for 4 mana. We have 16 generic mana to work with, which is pretty insane. So it can ramp up pretty quick. So that's definitely a neat thing that could happen. And that's the primary goal of what we're trying to do. And with all that mana, we can, filter it out and go that way. So let's go to all the cards that help assist this game plan. First off, let's start with some of the tutors here. We have Academy Reactor, which is going to be substituted out for like Enlightenment Tutor or something like that. But basically, we're looking for an enchantment card, in particular, Vesuvian Duplimancy, but we can grab any others. So some tutor effects are nice in this deck, like Search for Glory grabs Ovar, and then some other creatures that really help in spells that have this funny text here. Wizard Cycling. I believe this is the only 2 that have Wizard Cycling on their name. We can grab a generic wizard throughout our deck. However, we can also grab Ovar since he's a changeling, and some nice added effect later on in case we can't. So we can either bounce creatures or grab one of our secret commanders. And then Veldalkin Aether Mage for Wizard Cycling 3. Good against slivers, I guess, or if they have mess with Nexus, sure. However, can Wizard Cycle for that Ovar we need. So that's how we're getting one of our specific win cons out of the deck. And then also we want to be tutoring for those lands. So Weather Wayfarer grabs any land so long as we're behind in land drops. So it's a way to get one of those Locus lands. Tolarian West, nice card. Transmute, which they printed more. We can get a 0 CMC, which lands are 0 CMC. Grab a Locus land. And then Monument to Perfection. I don't think we'd be pulling this off of this deck. However, a little expensive, but also has the ability to grab either a basic or a Locus land. Reveal it, put it in your hand. So we have multiple ways to get the pieces we need to start our operation of, ramping up. And then we have some other neat effects which help us get there. Amulet of Vigor, very nice, can untap. If a permanent enters battlefield tapped, untap it. So that's how we get around the Cloud Post clause of comes into play tapped. So now we can use this mana right away, which makes it even more potent, right? Also, retreat to Core Helm. Got some landfall here, so why not? We can tap or untap target creature. Very cool. So this allows us to untap our land maybe that we just used for mana since it's a creature now, and then use it again. Also nice utility, scry 1. So whatever you need in your situation, like to see it. Intiller Engine, basically the same thing. You can untap the lands coming in. Those Locus lands, use them right away, have a ton of mana available. And so with all this mana, and it is a kind of dangerous setup because it is a little bit reliant on your commander or one of those enchantments or the other secret commander. But if you can pull it off, it's really neat to see. And we have ways of protecting our game plan. In particular, ways to protect our lands and creatures that need to be protected. Darksteel Garrison, a very interesting card. Don't see it too often, the fortify mechanic, but I think it just recently came out. Not positive, but we can turn our animated land to have indestructibility. Very cool. And then also when we tap it either for mana, target creature gets +1/+1 to end turn. Kind of cool. So neat little card. Works really well in the theme. Lightning Greaves, sick one. Of course, gives haste and shroud. You can put on your commander, protect them, anything you need. Pyramids is a fun card. I think it's on the reserve list, so it has that price tag here, but very unique. For 6 mana, you can pay 2. And you can either destroy target aura attached to the land, or the next time target land would be destroyed this turn, remove all damage marked on it instead. So nice way to protect our lands in case we make them creatures and opponents want to destroy them. Swift of Boots, protect your commander. And since we're dealing with a lot of +1/+1 counters, Ozolith fits really nice here too, in case they remove one of our creatures. Let's take a look at the board wipes here. Basically, we have some upgraded board wipes compared to the rest of the decks, right? Destroy all non-land creatures. Could take our commander and such. However, we're still left with a big animated land with a whole bunch of counters on it. Once all the creatures are gone, it's going to be swinging for a lot of damage. So these effects are very cool. And undo inversion, flips his land. But yeah, we leave our opponent's board states with nothing but lands, including us, and our lands are creatures. We're going to start swinging at people and dealing a ton of damage. And then other nice board wipes, per se, is return all non-land permanents to their hand. So again, one-sided board wipe for the most part for us. We can replay our stuff, especially if we have a ton of mana. This reminds me of the idea in Vintage Cube where you upheaval your opponent, or you cast upheaval, right? A card that returns all non-land permanents to their hand. Or no, it's all permanents to their hand, but you have a ton of mana left over, so you can replay your stuff. So similar idea, not quite as game-ending breaking as upheaval, but you could run that in the deck if you really want to, right? So Consuming Tide for 2 and 2. Each player chooses a non-land permanent they control. Return all non-land permanents they control chosen this way to their owner's hand. Then I draw cards for each one who has more cards in their hand. So set back the board state while drawing cards and everything else. Very nice to see. So those are all the ways that help us. And then how are we trying to end the game? And it has to do with some sort of infinite combo of sorts of generating a ton of mana. There's no finishing blow to the deck. However, if we do animate all our lands with +3/+3 counters on them and have access to unlimited counters, then that's kind of what I'm hoping to do to end the game. So I think the best card in the deck for this is View from Above, right? Most of the text on this card doesn't matter for these. However, there is one key part that they all share alike. For 2 mana, target creature gains flying until end of turn. If you control a white permanent, return View from Above to its owner's hand. So now, if we are creating infinite mana with our Locus Post, we can infinitely cast View from Above. Whirl of Volrath has buyback. something something down here, but we can cast this targeting our lands, right? So the important part is each of these target one singular permanent. This is a target creature, so our land has to be animated first, right? But the key part is, once we cast that, we can put the counters elsewhere, the +3/+3 counters, which is cool. So change the text to target permanent. We can target our lands by this, sure. And then it has buyback too, so it goes right back to our hand. Whispered Muse. This is a nice outlet to guarantee draw your whole deck if you have access to 6 mana, which we can do pretty easily if we have our cloud posts going online and they're coming in untapped. So there's a decent amount of components that need to come together to make this happen. However, the payoff is really cool to see. And you might be thinking by now, yeah, but where are you getting the blue mana to cast this? So we have 2 mana filtering artifacts here. This one cycles to draw a card, but this is an outlet to get our blue mana that we need for these spells. Same thing with Urn of Godfire. So there are multiple pieces that need to come together to make it happen, but usually you can generate enough value in the early game to keep you alive till you get there by bouncing stuff if board states get too wild, and so forth. And then let's go through the nice cards that really help the game plan go along. Starting with a counterspell package. Not a big counterspell guy, but I think 5 is pretty nice. Rewind. I love these counterspells because it gotcha and also untaps your lands, especially if they're tapping for a lot of mana, ton of value. Scatter to the Wind, and some of these cards have that Awaken text, which is nice flavor for the deck, because there's another way to animate your land, so I like to see that. Teferi Response is a really neat one. Not a true counterspell, but if they try to target a land you control, I can counter that spell or ability, right? Or an ability, which is key here, and then destroy that permanent while also drawing 2 cards. So you're looking to fire this off at any opportunity. Really cool. Unwind, 3 mana, counter non-target creature spell, untap up to 3 lands. So that's our package. Add more or less, however you see fit. Yep, nice flashback. Some instant sorcery cards returning to our hand. Nice to see. Halimar Tidecaller, really cool card. Since the battlefield, you can turn target card with Awaken, which we do have one of our board wipes. If you saw earlier, Planar Outburst has Awaken, so some card with value. So recursion spell for our high value cards. Also gives our lands flying and evasion for 3 mana. So once we animate them with a ton of counters, no flyers, they are swinging through. And then Strict Proctor is an interesting card. I really like this card, don't see it nearly enough, because you could work it 2-sided, where it's kind of like a extremely discounted Elish Norn that stops the ETBs. I think the Mother Machines one. So a permanent entering the battlefield causes a trigger ability to trigger. Counter that ability unless its controller pays 2. I have a future deck idea of making this the Secret Commander, because there's a lot of neat stuff you can do. Look out for that in the future. But stops a lot of shenanigans, especially Blink decks hate to see this. It's not a truly to shut them off, which it kind of does a bit. It just makes them pay extra for that ETB effect. So if we have some ETB stuff, sure, maybe we have to pay more, but we want some ETB effects that happen. We don't want them to go off. So let's take a look at like Lotus Field, right? Hexproof, enters the battlefield tap, sure. When Locus Field enters the battlefield, sacrifice 2 lands. So basically, this ability here is going to get countered by Strict Proctor here, unless we pay 2, which we're fine and not paying 2. So then it's just going to enter the battlefield, and now it just taps for 3, which is kind of crazy to see. Also with Lotus Veil, same idea, right? Sacrifice 2 lands, untap lands, or bury it. Won't go off unless we pay 2. So, and then lastly, Scorch Ruins, right? Comes unless we sacrifice 2 lands. So it stops these effects. There's other cards in the decks that have synergy with that, so really cool to see. So I threw it in there. So keep an eye out for that. And we have a decent enchantment package that helps us along. So Greater Aromancy gives her stuff Shroud, because there are some important enchantments in this deck. Resourceful Defense, you've seen this card a decent bit on this channel, but save those +1/+1 counters if they remove our land. So cool to see. And then lovely card that fits just too good in this type of deck is Sacred Ground for 2. Whenever spell ability opponent controls causes a land to be put in the graveyard from play, return that land to play. So if we do animate a bunch of lands out and they board wipe, at least we'll have some protection for them coming back into play, which is cool to see. And this kind of a win more card, but I'm yet to pull it off. It'd be really cool to see. Song of the World Soul for 6 mana. Every cast a spell populate. So populator works on creatures. So our land does have to be animated. And then once we cast those free instant sorceries, we're going to be populating a lot and getting a lot of the lands that we need. Just like that. And then, yeah, lastly we have here, or let's say look one before. Yep. Terraria Eternal, 3 mana, lands are indestructible. So now we have indestructible creature lands. Very powerful. And then Trade Routes, which I haven't got to play with yet. This is a fresher deck, so 2 mana. I wanted to play with this card a lot, been looking for a niche place. I feel like this is it. Return target land you control to its owner hand, and then you can discard a land card from your hand to draw a card. So you can churn through if you have enough lands after creating a ton of copies. Just bounce the lands you don't need, and then start drawing cards. So neat little card for 2 mana. Let's go down the list here. We have some other ways to create token copies of our lands. Crackling Counterpart. Create more copies of Cloud Post, Glimmer Post, all that good stuff. A flashback. Love to see it. Frantic Search untaps 3 lands and also draws, so doubly good in this deck. And Sphinx's Revelation. Really nice outlet to all our mana. So we do also want some big outlet for our either infinite or near infinite mana to draw a ton of cards, gain a ton of life. So love to see it in the deck. Teferi's Protection. You can run whatever protection spells you want, but this one guarantees that your stuff stays around, of course. To Arms, untaps all creatures you control, draw cards, so it cycles. But again, if we have a whole bunch of lands that are animated, untap all your mana, basically, right? For 2 mana. Very cool. And then Vanish into Memory. Love this card, right? Try to find a way to sneak it in decks. Works super well here. So doubles as temporary removal on opponent's cards, because exile target creature, and you draw cards equal to that creature's power. So if they have a token creature with a ton of +1/+1 counters on it, let's say 10, you are exiling it, which is getting rid of it for good and drawing 10 cards. Awesome. Beginning your next upkeep, return that card to the battlefield under its own control. If you do, discard cards equal to that creature's toughness. So again, tokens don't come back in, so you're discarding none. So 4 mana, draw 10 cards. Insane. Or you could target your own land, which let's say has 15 counters on it, which is easy. And then it comes back in the battlefield as a land and doesn't have any toughness anymore, loses its counters. So if you do, discard 0 lands. So it could be a very, very powerful combo in the deck. Love to see it. Let's go over some of the other important lands. So we have a Blinkmoth Nexus, which we can turn to a creature ourselves, and has that flying ability on its own. So we can either animate it with, Noyan Dar, the Roil Shaper, and then pay the 1 to give it flying, basically, which is really cool to see. We can swing over top of opponents. Cavern of Souls, we don't want our stuff countered, so that's an obvious one. And some nice theme is you can animate your own land, so I threw a couple of them in here. And in Field to Dead, if we're making a ton of token copy lands, we have a lot of different land name types. We'll also be creating a zombie army in the meanwhile. So fits super good in this deck. And then of course Inkmoth Nexus can be a win con out of nowhere. If you have this on the battlefield, you create copies of this and then put all the counters on them, because of course it deals infect damage, has flying, so hard to block. Yeah, and all we need is 3 casts of instant sorceries from our commander, put 9+1/+1s, animate it. Now it's a 10/10. You can one-shot someone even later on, so a nice fit there. And then we have Thespian Stage and Vesuvian, which are similar, but they come in copies of target land, which can be your cloud post. So it's like an additional copy of each of these lands. So nice to see here. Went over mana filtering and ramp. I think the last thing to touch on really is these sorceries here. Love this card. Finale Revelation. Have this in another deck. I can actually see it right here, right? It's my Banta deck. So, really cool card, but basically, you can dump all the extra mana to draw a ton of cards, untap 5 lands if it's 10 or more, and you have no maximum hand size. So, very cool. And shuffles your graveyard in the library. Could be important. Really cool to see. Replication technique, easy way to duplicate something. An opponent can also, but then you can get 2 copies of something. Nice, nice. Rite of Replication, a big kicker spell that can create a whole bunch of token copies of the land type that we want. Love to see it. And Tezzeret Gambit. Proliferate's kind of nice if we have a lot of counters on our creatures that we animated, but it also draws cards. So I think it's a nice, well-rounded package. A lot of moving parts in the deck to assemble, but that's why I feel like a few teeters are definitely more than okay in this deck. I would say this is more casual, maybe a little bit higher up depending on how explosive a start you get, but like for the most part, pretty casual deck. But I thought it was a neat idea to delve into, because I looked at Cloud Post and said, how can I abuse this card? And this is one way to have some nice synergies built around it while also building a full inclusive deck. So, yeah. Without further ado, this has been the Roil Shaper Lands Matter deck, animating lands into creatures. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know what you think about the deck, what deck you want to see next, something along those lines, or if you have a deck of your own that you want me to take a look at. I am more than happy to do that. So thank you guys for watching. Until the next one, I will see ya. This has been Momo versus MTG.